Well, Sox spring break continues, and we are joined, Len Kasper, Jason Benetti, joined by White Sox Senior Vice President and General Manager, Rick Hahn. Hi, Rick.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me. Welcome to my hotel room.
I love what you've done with the place.
Well, thanks. It's been working on that piece of art behind me and open to suggestions about how to improve it, Jason.
Would you call that a collage?
I don't call it a mess. I took art fundamentals in high school, but obviously it didn't stick. So at this point, I don't know what I'd call that other than a rental property.
Nice.
Well, you notice, Rick, over my shoulder and over Jason's, it looks very white and snowy.
It does.
And it's not the case where you are, and that's good news. This is a great time of year, isn't it?
This is a great time of year. Look, it's and I got a number of phone calls this morning when our driveway wasn't plowed by 10 a.m., so I know exactly what people are suffering through back home. And it's nice to be on the precipice of providing people hopefully some distraction and some much-needed taste of spring and summer that we're all looking forward to.
So when the season ends in Oakland last year, what did you want out of this coming off season that has just happened?
You know, I think we obviously felt like we made a nice step forward last year. It was an important season for many of our young guys to show that they're capable of playing championship level ball. To get that taste of postseason experience was beneficial to everyone. And I think a lot of our veteran players acclimated themselves well to the clubhouse. But I'd be lying if I didn't say that we all left Oakland last year at the end of the playoffs feeling very unsatisfied and feeling like we were on the precipice of opening up a very successful stage in White Sox baseball, but totally dissatisfied about where we sat on that day. We felt it was important to add a veteran stabilizer to the rotation. The bullpen, while primarily anchored by young arms, was a strength last year, but one we wanted to improve as well. And we wanted to solidify the lineup a little bit and extend it out a little bit by adding a player like Adam Eaton to right field. So we left there feeling a level of satisfaction with the season, but also a great deal of unfinished business on our plate and feeling like that was only an appetizer of what we're capable of doing over the long term.
Hey, Rick, obviously we'll talk a lot about 2021, but I want to kind of lengthen this conversation a little bit about Oakland. The value of postseason experience, right? The idea that every at-bat, every pitch really do matter. And while your job is to help build a club that over the long haul, and last year the long haul meant 60 games, can be the best team in a division or get into that tournament. But how important is that experience? It ended up, as you say, leading to kind of a bad taste in these guys' mouths, which can be a huge motivator going into 2021.
No, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, no one was satisfied with the way things wound up, but you know, it's sort of that taste of honey thing. Like people wanted more. People, and I think you'll hear over the coming days as our players are available to the media. There's this thirst to finish what we started. It was a great experience. The intensity was fantastic. Obviously, we wished it was a little bit longer to garner even more of that experience. But was a big stage that players felt like they belonged on and want to get back to finish what we started.
You talk about belonging on that. When did you sense in last season, and we'll move to 2021 in a moment, when did you sense last season that started to develop?
I think it was, we were all 30 teams were in a difficult spot with spring training 2.0, as we were all sort of trying to make do and trying to ramp guys up after having them sort of stagnated in their ramp ups. And then trying to get ready for a season with only a handful of exhibition games. It was really sort of a difficult process for all 30 clubs. And none of us, I feel, really hit a rhythm early on. Certainly our situation was we didn't come out of the gate extremely strong, and I don't really recall any club jumping out to, your traditional 8-2 or 9-1 start that we annually seem to see throughout the game. So it really took us at least a week until we probably got to Kansas City that we started clicking that second week of the season. We've had our fair share of injuries early, especially on the pitching side with Lopez and Rodon and Lambert and Bummer all going down within, I believe, the first 12 days or so. So we had to adapt on the fly, but fortunately we were able to have some of our young guys step up in a way where we really didn't kill the momentum that we were able to establish. But it was tricky. We'd be lying if, that first time you're traveling under COVID protocols and you're dealing with the new rules and you're dealing with players who had sort of a non-traditional ramp up. It took a little bit of getting used to, but I'd say by the second week of the season or third week of the season, we felt like, okay, we've got this under control. We know how to go about our daily business. And then it was just a matter of playing good baseball, which the team started doing fairly quickly.
Rick, you're gonna find out as the weeks go by, but based on your conversations with your pitchers, and your pitching coaches in the organization, is that kind of the biggest area where spring training last year gets shut down, 10 days before the start of the season? Guys go home. They don't know when they're supposed to start throwing. They go to summer camp. As you say, pretty much the entire league on the pitching side wasn't quite where everybody wanted it to be when the season started. Then the season ends, and now you're kind of back to, quote, normal. But it's not totally normal yet, right?
It's certainly not totally normal in terms of our day-to-day. I mean, look, everyone's going to be masked up at all times, where the amount of access we're permitted to have is limited. Early on in camp, it's going to be smaller groups per the protocols. So it's going to take a little bit of getting used to and easing ourselves into it. I do think, Kenny and I joked about this last year during the summer camp. As much as we used to complain about 30 exhibition games, because after about a week, you're like, all right, these are meaningless. Let's get going on the season. I don't think anyone is going to complain about 30 exhibition games this spring, because it is going to give us the chance to sort of not only return to some level of normalcy in terms of our daily work, but also give guys ample time to ramp up according to whatever pace they may need to be on. Some guys are going to come on a little bit ahead of schedule, some a little behind. That happens every year. And I think we're going to appreciate having the full 6 weeks this time around after last year's summer camp experience, just to get everybody lined up the way we need to.
You talk about ramping up, and we all watched Yoán Moncada struggle with COVID-19 and the after effects last year. Where is he, and how is he right now?
He's, knock on wood, he's showing no ill effects whatsoever. He's back to full strength. He says he feels great. He was out here in Arizona for a stretch this off season recently and went through all his work without any issue. And knock on wood, this COVID experience seems to be behind Yoán. That was sort of one of the greater eye openers of last season. I mean, look, we all of us were living through a pandemic, baseball family or not baseball family. And we were all sort of dealing with unknowns. And it really brought home when a 25-year-old kid who's sort of at the peak of his physical ability just couldn't shake this thing. I mean, we were fortunate in that he had limited symptoms other than the fatigue initially, but the fatigue just sort of lingered throughout the entire season. There was the, sort of public evidence of that when we were playing in Cleveland. And I think he went from first to home that last week of the season. And we weren't sure he was going to be able to take the field coming out of the dugout. He was just completely out of breath. And this was, 2+ months after he had essentially been cleared of the actual positivity of the disease. There were some times behind the scenes where, talking with Joe McEwing, he'd do a pregame infield drill. He'd take 10 ground balls and he'd be gassed. And that's just not what you would expect from a professional athlete, much less a 25-year-old who's as physically gifted as Yoán. So he, his 2020 season was actually fairly remarkable in terms of what he was able to do under the conditions. But come 2021, we're certainly expecting him to be much closer to the player we saw in 19 than we saw in 20.
Rick, for the record, we've gone over 10 minutes here, and Benetti hasn't broken bad on me yet, so that's a record. We've got the dueling studio microphones here, so it's a very professional operation, as you can see.
Hello, yes.
You mentioned Moncada. Give us a quick Madrigal update. I know he expects to be ready come opening day if it were up to him with the shoulder, and then Michael Kopech going into camp.
First, Nick Madrigal is coming along very nicely. As you guys know, he had surgery at the end of the season to address the shoulder separation that he suffered early in the season and help stabilize the area. His recovery has gone very smoothly, and he is essentially probably a week or two away from being completely without restrictions, and we should see him playing in Cactus League games sometime in early March. So he, knock on woods, on a very nice pace to be ready come opening day. Kopech is doing great. He's here in Glendale. I'm not sure if he's throwing on day 1 or day 2 yet. Haven't seen the schedule yet, but he's going to be treated just like everybody else, and we will ramp him up accordingly, being cognizant of the fact that this is someone who hasn't faced hitters in over 2 years. So in terms of mapping out what's reasonable to expect of him over the course of the season, we need to be realistic. I think an important thing when we look at Michael and, to a similar extent, Garrett Crochet, you're dealing with 2 young, very talented arms, both of whom that we project long-term to be in the rotation, but neither of whom have a significant innings base under them for various reasons, given their usage over the last 2 years. So we need to be creative with how we're going to use both of those players because, 1, we have high expectations for them long term. 2, we have high expectations for this season for ourselves, and we feel they can contribute to help us meet those expectations. And 3, something that we don't want to lose sight of is we want both of them strong and productive and contributing through October if everything goes the way we want. So we've had a lot of conversations about the best way to use both of those players. And, over the course of the next few weeks in our conversations with them, and we evaluate where they're at physically, we'll start sharing more about how we're going to deploy them both over the course of the season.
Jason, before you jump back in, I want to mention this and ask Rick, just in general terms, not necessarily just the White Sox, but industry-wide. I know in my mind there's an assumption that there won't be any opt-outs this year because we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, but is that's probably not a safe assumption, right? Is it possible guys might opt out or might not want to play until mid-season? Have you heard any scuttlebutt along those lines? Because I haven't.
I have not either, actually. Is it possible? Sure. It certainly is conceivable. I think as our knowledge of the disease and our ability to get through last season and seeing other leagues, navigating through their own protocols for their seasons, probably has made people a little more comfortable with going through what lies ahead. That said, certainly if people have any apprehensions or concerns, those are things we're going to have to address as they arise. But thus far, I haven't really heard much scuttlebutt along those lines at all.
It's hard to read people's faces from a distance, and we're, states away here, but I'm sensing that you're getting Sox Fest nostalgic, Rick, slightly. The thing that I know you miss from Sox Fest when we can't have it is questions from the audience.
Yes.
And so Brian Gailey, our video guy, who's wonderful, has sent me some questions from people that I'm going to sprinkle in while we're doing this. And by the way, that walk-up means you're stuck with us for at least like 10, 15 more minutes. While we're doing this means it's going to go much longer than you expected. I want to start with Mark from Schaumburg, who asks, even though the team already had a strong bullpen, why did the front office want to put resources there over DH/outfield? This is Mark from Schaumburg.
All right, a couple different ways of approaching that one. First, obviously we like the bullpen we had in 2020. A lot of the players from that group are going to be returning this year and playing prominent roles, including Aaron Bummer, who we missed a key part of our bullpen for the bulk of last season. That said, as we've looked at championship caliber clubs, having a lockdown bullpen is a nice asset as you head through October. Also, providing Tony and Ethan with more options in that pen, more premium options in that pen, will allow them to handle the rotation differently. So throughout this, going back to even the start of the rebuild, when we've had opportunities to add premium players at premium positions, we've pursued that. Adding Liam Hendriks, arguably among the best closers in the game right now, we saw another opportunity to add a premium piece that is going to play an important role on a championship club, that being the bullpen. We did obviously address the outfield with Adam Eaton. And from a DH standpoint, we feel like we may well have some internal options that we want to give those opportunities to, that not only the at-bats and the play time, but the experience. I mean, as you look at our offense from last year and you project our offense going forward, knock on wood, if everyone's healthy, it should be fairly productive. That does provide us with the opportunity to allow some of our young kids to grow at the big league level, to continue that development in Chicago. You look back at those Braves teams that rattled off all those divisions in a row in the 90s. And one of the things they were really good at is annually graduating some minor league players and developing them at the big league level so that they had some internal options and were able to keep that thing going for as long as they did. Now, I don't know if we'll ever see a run anywhere in baseball like Atlanta was able to put together. It's just so truly remarkable. But if you aspire to have that kind of continuity of success, you're going to have to give opportunities to young players along the way to show what they can do instead of every year going out into free agency and adding guys via trade.
So
We've obviously shown a willingness to add the veterans where needed, such as Adam Eaton in the outfield this year. But we still want to take the opportunities when we can to develop our own players.
Let me ask you then, who's in the bank of names that you would use as graduating pieces this year?
I would count Crochet and Kopech among two that are going to continue to develop at the big league level. Nick Madrigal had the injury setback, so he's still a young player, but he's someone who's going to have hopefully a full year under his belt this year. Andrew Vaughn is someone who is very much on our minds and in the mix to contribute over the course of this season. Yerman Mercedes, all he's ever done is hit at every level he's been at. So that might be the kind of guy you want to take a look at some point at the big league level. Zach Collins has made a fair amount of progress and is worthy of an opportunity at some point to hopefully get extended at bats. So again, not saying all those guys are going to play prominent roles over the course of the entire 2021 season, but those are each important and or interesting guys that, need to continue to develop and show how they fit, not just for 21, but for 22 and beyond.
All right, let's do some Sox math. See, I did my homework.
Go away.
That's how it works in the TV booth.
I need to phone a friend if that's the case.
Is Jacob there? Because he's the guy.
Retired. He's a retired champion.
It was a forcible retirement, as I've heard.
Negotiations are ongoing, but he's retired.
Right. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe 26 on the opening day roster, and looking at September being 28, which was the original concept for 2020. So, kind of a two-part question on those. Are you generally averse to three catchers on a roster for an extended period of time, and does that extra spot make you? And there's no limit on pitchers, correct? Would have been 13 to start last year. Okay. I'm sure Ethan would rather have 20 pitchers on the staff if he could help it. But are you averse to three catchers? Because you already mentioned a couple of guys for an extended period of time. And then number two, Rick, competition in spring training is typically what the media talks about. Like, here are the position battles, and here are 4 guys for 2 spots in the rotation and 6 guys for 3 spots in the bullpen. Is there a healthy amount of competition here, knowing that a lot of spots, assuming health is good, are pretty much set for opening day?
Yeah, competition is good. Quite frankly, and I've said this over the years, I think a little too much is made over the opening day roster. I mean, there's excitement, there's pomp and circumstance. Everyone wants to be on the plane, leaving Arizona with the big club. But I think, it might be an average of like 3.5 days before you make the first roster move of the season.
Right.
So it's not, you're not exactly bound by those 26 as much as we all would wish to believe we have the perfect 26 when we leave Arizona. So the competition serves not just for that opening day roster, but for also being in a good position for when inevitably we need reinforcements or we need to make a move. With regards to the roster composition, at times last year we did carry 3 catchers. Obviously, it was a larger roster, which made that a little easier, and also keep in mind for our young catchers, there wasn't really competition going on other than what was going on in Schaumburg. So from time to time, we felt having them active and having them around and occasionally getting some ABs in Chicago was probably better for their development than another 10-day stint in Schaumburg. This year, assuming the minor league season is going, that calculation might be a little different from time to time. Ultimately, we'll have conversations with Tony towards the end of camp about, how he feels, what he feels perhaps that roster is missing on the fringes. Part of the three catcher calculus will also be his willingness to have both catchers in the lineup at the same time, which was something we did from time to time last year. And if he's not comfortable with that, and it's still something from a lineup standpoint we think makes sense, then perhaps you need that third catcher to give him that safety net. But those are conversations that will happen over the next few weeks.
I've got another question from the crowd, and this is not on video. You're just going to have to listen to me do it. McKay, who did not give where he's from or she, asks if you think Eloy will stick in left field or worth trying him at DH. This is the first time you've ever gotten this question, so I hope you're ready for it.
I'm ready for it, McKay. Thank you for the question. Eloy's our left fielder. Yeah, we view him as a left fielder. He, in fact, just today on our staff, one of our staff Zoom calls, we talked about not only the progress he's made out there over the last 2 years, but also the fact that Eloy really doesn't like getting defensive subbed late in games. Now, that didn't stop Ricky, and it's not going to stop Tony from doing it when it's in the best interest of the club winning a ball game. But it is a motivator for Eloy to keep working. He doesn't like that. He's embarrassed by that. He wants to be out there when we're winning ball games late. And he's put in the work to earn that opportunity and is someone that we foresee as being out there. He certainly has the bat to handle the DH position. But from a maximizing our effectiveness of our roster standpoint, we're probably better off with Eloy in left, assuming he continues to progress defensively the way we've seen and he continues to put in the work, and having a different bat in the DH spot.
Go ahead, Jason.
I was just going to say, we do have one video question, and why don't we get to that? Brian will go ahead and play this. It is from Zach, and it's going to lighten the mood a little bit.
The mood's dark.
Hello, Mr. Hahn. My question to you is, do you happen to have a favorite podcast or radio show? Perhaps maybe one about baseball? Thanks.
That might emanate from New Trier High School.
Right.
There's a very strong one, but it's only really as strong as the guests that they're able to get on that podcast. And we're obviously referring to the Bases Loaded podcast at WNTH, which both Mr. Kasper and Mr. Benetti have kindly served as hosts, or excuse me, as guests for the New Trier podcast. So that is my favorite. I'm a little biased towards one of the hosts, obviously, but I know they appreciate having you guys on. They've never invited me, so clearly there's a threshold that you guys are above that I am not in order to maintain the caliber of that podcast.
Well, I was on the day before Len got hired. Yep. And sort of like snuck in there the possibility that Len might really like doing radio. So they break news sometimes.
They do break news.
They do.
In fact, Jacob came up to our room right after he finished with you, and he was all excited. And that's when I told him about the news about Len. And he was like, well, Jason said something like that. And he got all excited about it. But it was very nice to do that for them. They enjoyed it.
It was great. They asked great questions.
I only have one more for you, Rick, and this would be current. Your favorite current White Sox play-by-play announcer.
Huh,
Wow.
No, that's unfair. I
That's
don't want to
tough.
do that to Jason.
gotta go.
Jason's definitely in the top 2, though. I promise you that.
There you go. That's a good answer. That's all I got, Jason. We got to ease Rick into this whole mess.
I got one more question from fans because James Fegan is not the only guy who asks esoteric minor league questions. Derek Bridges, and this isn't that esoteric. Derek Bridges asks, how close do you think joelkis Cespedes is to the big leagues?
Look, from a tools and talent standpoint, he's knocking on the door. That said, this guy hasn't played competitively in a couple of years. So we're going to take it slow with him. He is going to be one of the attendees at minicamp going on here in Glendale starting later this month. And it is conceivable that over the course of March, when we need some backups, you might see him over in a major league game from time to time. His progress will be basically dictated by how quickly he knocks off the rust. We'll all find out together what a minor league season is going to look like here in the coming months. Hopefully he gets an opportunity to join one of our affiliates by May and have a full summer playing there. But we're going to keep an open mind in terms of the timeline, but we're really going to let him dictate it based upon how much opportunity he gets to play, which is what he really needs at this point.
Couple names this spring training that as people are watching or listening to our games, you are really hoping for something for or have a keen eye for?
I'm going to go off the beaten path a little bit here because obviously everyone knows sort of the regulars and the top prospects and the guys that get most of the notoriety. So I'm going to say excited to see Gavin Sheets, left-handed bat who had a nice season at AA in 19 and in instructional league. He's added the ability to play the outfield corners, and that expanding one's versatility is always a good thing. When you add in the way his bat was seemingly coming along prior to COVID, you start having a pretty intriguing player on your hands, and certainly one that we've been asked about by other clubs, given the ability to add the outfield to his resume, and someone we're looking forward to seeing here. I'd be remiss if I didn't say Jake Berger. I mean, just given the path that this kid has had to endure to get back to essentially where he was when he originally got hurt in big league camp a few years back, your heart goes out to him, and it's an impossible guy not to root for, just given the path he's followed, much less given his personality. And then on top of that, the fact that he's a really good baseball player when he's healthy and could conceivably help us here in the coming years. So those are probably the two that may not be exactly on everyone's radar as we enter into camp, but are two guys we're looking forward to seeing.
And you burned through any shows during the whole COVID thing that you want to share with everybody?
Well, obviously I did Tiger King like everybody. That was required. That's table stakes. My wife got me into The Crown, which I surprisingly liked. I enjoyed that far, far more than I thought I would. The Americans, we went through that. That was a nice little older series that we went back and grabbed. And my younger son Charlie got us started watching this just awful show out of Canada called Trailer Park Boys that he, I think, only chooses to watch when it's his turn to choose, just to irritate everybody like a good 15-year-old. But fortunately, I had to come out here and work, so I left my wife and his brother behind to watch Trailer Park Boys with Charlie.
Fantastic. Rick, always insightful, sometimes good recommendations for television. Thank you so much for doing this.
Hey, great to see you guys. Look forward to seeing you out here soon. Be well.
Thanks, Rick.
Thanks, Rick.